live and uncensored.
I don't go out of my way to put photos of myself in the national press. If people choose to take photos of me and put them in, that's their issue.
Have you been on Facebook? Have you?
Never.
What do you mean, never?
I mean, never.
I'm trying to wrap my head around why you're having so much trouble.
Well, I'm not. I'm not having trouble. If people want to spend their time on this planet ranting and raving in the blogosphere, good for them, but I don't have to watch. Well, there we go. Well, that's a shame that I had this long education. I should have.
You could have just gone up.
I could have just rung you, yeah. It's the rise and rise of the selfie mentality. Oh, look at me, I'm doing this, Mummy. Look at me, I'm doing that. And my favourite colour's red and I don't like sausages. Me. Are you going to just be witty or you let me finish what I'm saying? Let's say 10 people love you in the world, if you're lucky.
Whoa, that's pretty low there.
We are, in our privileged society, in a position for the first time ever where we can ask what do we want mid-21st century society to look like.
Intelligent listening for dangerous minds.
This is Litopia.
Litopia After Dark. After Dark.
Greetings, Litopians. This is Ian Wynn, the techno-pagan octopus messiah, welcoming you to another fun-filled edition of Litopia After Dark. We're welcoming today you, your brain, and your mind, if it's not completely rotted out by Facebook. And tonight, our special guest is none other than the acclaimed neuroscientist, writer, broadcaster, and member of the House of Lords, Baroness Susan Greenfield. Do I call you Baroness? Can I address you as...
Well, that makes me sound like something out of Alice in Wonderland. It sounds like the Red Queen. So, no, Ian, I think we can be on first name terms, given we're going to have a long...
We can do Susan?
A long and heated chat, I'm sure.
Okay,
so
but can I drop a Baroness in there every now and then? My mom's listening.
You can if you want. You could elevate me. You could call me a princess if you like.
Ooh, really? Well, do you get a title with that? Do you change the title?
No, once when I was in an Arab country, they confused it and called me princess. Yeah.
That's fine. I'm sure you didn't...
Yeah. No, I could get used to that, don't worry.
Okay, you've got 30 honorary degrees.
31, actually.
30.
They come along like buses. Yeah.
They do. Unbelievable. 31 since I last checked the Wikipedia. Spent several years as the director of the prestigious Royal Institute, and your website states that, quote, building on your previous work on non-cholinergic actions of acetylcholinesterase, you and a colleague identified a region toward the C-terminus of 14 amino acid peptide with close homologies to amyloid precursor protein. So, well done.
Yeah, sounds like you really understand it. You said with great feeling.
I was at first. I thought it was a 12 amino acid peptide.
No, exactly. No fooling you.
When I carried the one, I realized that I think it's safe to say you've got some serious chops in neuroscience. Mm-hmm. And on that, I really want to know: did you meet the Queen?
Oh, I have. Yes, I have.
And because you've talked about how we're all being desensitized by social media, especially things like smell and touch.
If you look at my website, what I'm really proud of, I think if one looks back at things you've achieved or things that you feel you can go and play your harp up in heaven, having done. When I was director of the Royal Institution and it was refurbished, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh came to celebrate the reopening. And because I was director and I was the hostess, I could choose who was presented to her. So, of course, top of the list was my mum and dad.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a photo on the website of the Queen actually being presented by me to mum, and it's the most perfect shot. Although it was a snap, everyone is perfectly positioned. Everyone, apart from my mother, wearing shades of aquamarine. Mum is wearing white.
Are you just saying that? Did it
look
really
on the website, you'll see it.
Okay.
No, there was a snapshot, but it looked... And so, as someone said, you can die and go to heaven.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And my mum says she remembers a little girl looking through the railings at Buckingham Palace because, her dad was a painter and mum was a cleaner.
Right.
So she looked and said if someone had told her then, one day there would be such a photo, she would have thought they were crazy.
So getting back onto the sensory level, what did she smell like?
Oh, please.
No, I mean, okay, my money is on a lavender plant in a bank vault. No?
No, I can't.
Come on, go back. You talk about us being desensitized, not having smell, not having touch. We're all reduced to sight and sound.
No, not...
All right. Well, we're going to waft some different essential oils under your nose, and if you hit one, then
if I recognize it, you'll be the first to know.
Then please let us know.
Yeah.
So, in order to become a baroness, as an American here, trying to come to grips with how things work. I'm guessing this is not a title that you received from the 16th century.
Oh. No. As I said, my dad. Well, my father's an electrician, my mum was a dancer.
Electrician and Hammersmith, so that's it. And you didn't marry a baron.
I certainly didn't.
So you're telling me there's another way.
There is.
How can I become a baroness?
I think you have to change nationality as well as gender. But you could settle for a law, but you still have to change gender. You still have to become British, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am British. I've got the
Oh, you
I
don't
got the
sound
password.
it. Yeah, okay.
I don't sound it. Yeah.
No,
well,
no.
only the immigrants call themselves British. So you're a member of the House of Lords.
Yes.
And your book, Mind Change, is in no small part predicated on a short debate that...
Yeah, what happened? Well, actually, this actually shows one of the huge advantages of having a platform in the House of Lords. It was before the short debate. This is in 2011? 2009. And there was debate on child pornography sites, on regulation of child pornography sites. And the etiquette, if you volunteer to speak in a debate, is that you talk to your subject and on the areas that you really know about. So, for example, I wouldn't give people my views on the Middle East crisis,
right.
Or certainly not on the economic woes of the world. So, but on this, I thought I could present a particular angle that I did know about. And so because I don't know anything about regulation and so on, or the law, but what I could talk about was the fact that the brain, and perhaps we'll develop this, the brain adapts to the environment. And I said, therefore, if the environment is changing, as screen culture arguably is, then the brain will change, albeit for good or bad, but there'll certainly be changes because that's what human brains do. They adapt to what they're exposed to. And this, I think, any credible neuroscientist would have gone along with. It's a very simple syllogism. And yet it met with the most complete explosion in the print and broadcast media, including more lurid things like Baroness says computers rot the brain and so on. That led me, of course, to talk and think and research and develop these ideas more.
Hello, I'm Eric Beck-Rubin, hardcore out-of-control book enthusiast, inviting you to listen to a new show here on Litopia called Burning Books. Every 3 weeks, we put out a new podcast on a single book. It could be a recent debut, a classic, fiction, nonfiction, and everything in between. The idea is to explore what lies at the heart of great books, books that try to be great but don't quite make it, as well as, now and then, books that are irredeemably bad. So check out our archive shows on Litopia, and we'll look forward to having you join us for our next podcast.
Burning Books, exclusively from Litopia.com.
There was a forum on internet porn.
Yes, on regulation.
On regulation of child porn.
Yeah.
And you organized a short debate on the subject.
No, I didn't
organize
that. No. So what happened with that? I just gave
how did you get to the short debate?
I gave my 5 steps. Well, spool on 2 or 3 years after.
Yes, please.
Because of the clear attention this got and interest it was for people, I thought I would do my own debate in the Lords to ask Her Majesty's government.
You can just do that?
You can't just do that. You can bid for it. And, there's a ballot and so on.
Well, obviously there's a procedure, but if we were running a television show, that would be the next scene.
Yeah, you put in a bid, and I was lucky enough to secure time.
Fantastic. How much time?
An hour.
How much?
For the short debate, it's about an hour.
Is that an hour that you get to speak, or is that an hour that...
Sorry.
Okay, I'll take that as a no.
Yeah, it's a no.
It's an hour for you to ask a question and then for them to hem and
You'll
haw?
talk for about 10 minutes, and then the others that sign up will talk for 5, and then the minister will close.
So you're talking about the impact of digital technologies on the mind, which is a huge thing that's happening right now. And I think most people intuitively will go, wow, 11.5 hours a day per person is kind of, maybe that's not a great thing. We should look at that.
Yeah.
And you bring that to the floor of the House of Lords for what amounts to an hour. Mm-hmm. And yet recently they debated primogenitor versus ultimogenitor, which is whether the estate passes to the girl child or the boy child or the first child. And that went through 3 times, three days of debate, 2 debates, and then they kicked it upstairs to the House of Commons. Like, you've been in that chamber. What planet are they living on?
Well, just because something's important to you doesn't mean to say it's important to everyone in the same way.
But if you talk about if you talk about politics and governing social change and what's happening, then how is this not a bigger issue?
Well, of course, I'm on your side. Of course, I think it's an important issue and an exciting issue. But that doesn't mean to say other issues that are very important to some people, even though we don't quite understand that or empathize with, doesn't mean to say it shouldn't be debated as well.
To defend the House of Lords.
Okay, I think it's very... Yeah, okay, I will. I think it's... I think it's very important to have a hinterland, as it were, that's very much the junior chamber, which everyone would agree it was, because it's not an elected chamber, where people who are experts in various fields can give their views on ideas that are coming up and can add their voice to amending bills. That is to say, in the House of Lords, you will have a huge collection of experts. In my case, I'm a scientist. You'll have diplomats and educationalists and industrialists, all of whom have a lifetime of experience that is not there for the elected politicians. And therefore, although no one would suggest that they trump what happens in the House of Commons, far from it, that added dimension, that depth, can really add insight and significance to laws that are being passed.
I think most people would agree with you, but it's the birthright thing that
the hereditaries are very few now. They have their own internal elections, but most of them left, and I think it's about 2001 or 98. I can't remember the exact date, but
okay, that was
certainly
very well. That was very well played. Managed to defend both sides. So, question then: what did they conclude after this short debate?
Okay, so the issue of the debates. A debate in the Lords is not like a debate even in, say, the Oxford Union, or a debate as we're used to thinking of it as an adversarial slugging out of ideas where people come back and interrupt and refer and it gets heated. They're very formal. So there's a particular order where it's timed. You have a fixed time. Everyone has the same amount of time divided in. And you stand up at the allocated slot and you read your speech and then you sit down again. So it's not as if there's, I say, a heated exchange. So what happens is nonetheless it's noted. And the idea would be... So
people are hemming and hawing, going, well, I don't know if this is a good idea. Or what do you think there, Nigel?
Well, they might be saying that to each other, but actually as a speech, most people will showcase their expertise, their view, and then you can read Hansard the next day. Everyone can read that. It's on the web, wherever. And for example, we had a debate on stem cells. Now, if you knew nothing about stem cells but were to read the Hansard report of that, you would suddenly have in one document information on the ethics, the philosophy, the economics, the science, the clinical applications, the future. You would know a lot more about stem cells in a very quick way. So it's in that sense, I think it has a huge value, those kind of debates. But perhaps debates is a strange word to use.
Okay.
Because it's not as most people would understand them.
We'll come back to the debates, because the way you open your book, I am reading Mind Change. I'm working my way through it.
I would expect nothing less.
Thank you. Yes.
The
thing is, I'd be going a lot faster, but my Facebook keeps pinging, and I have to check my
Absolutely.
Twitter feed, and then I've got to update my World of Warcraft character.
Yeah, and you're going to tell me you keep Goldfish next.
And then I have. Oh, and don't get me started. You have said some horrible things about Goldfish.
I have.
But I've sworn to the producer that I'm not going to go there. Goldfish are very bright, and they for Goldfish.
And they have individuality.
They have personalities.
Great personalities.
That's right.
Do differential equations.
Some of my best friends are Goldfish. You studied classics and maths for your A-levels. You got a degree in philosophy from Oxford. Okay. What led you to neuroscience?
Okay,
and specifically Alzheimer's. Is there a personal connection there? How did this all go down?
No, certainly not personal connection. And this is quite interesting to unpack, actually, if you
do it. Unpack that suitcase. Take out the toiletries.
So I did A-levels. I went to a school that was really enlightened in that they indulged you as much as you could to choose whatever strange combination of A-levels you could do, and sadly that's not
in the States. We call that a special school.
Well, it was a special school, but it wasn't said in that kind of tone of voice.
Oh,
but it
right.
was a special school.
Yes, Johnny just likes to play with bricks.
No. So, I like to learn Latin and Greek and ancient history, which is what I did.
These are very complicated bricks.
Yeah, people have an elitist and complicated view of the classics, but I think that's a shame, because it's the most wonderful basis for an education. It gives you a comparison of history and literature in two different civilizations. By doing the language and the literature simultaneously, it's a very economic way of learning something. It gives you a huge understanding and foundation about how languages work. And on top of that, you're comparing and contrasting two very different civilizations. So it's a very economic education. It's a very and it really is very rigorous on developing your working memory, because the grammar is very complex. So you have to have all these rules and ideas and memories as you're doing it. So, and it brings out great analytical skills as well. So I think
it's almost learning a new language.
Well, it is almost that. The Victorians were right. It was something that I think was a very rounded education, and still is. So anyway, I did that, and I did maths, pure maths.
Okay.
And then because I did the classics, I really got excited by philosophy.
Right.
Because these big questions that the Greeks especially were posing in the Greek tragedies, like what is destiny? How much free will do you have?
Destiny is a new MMORPG game that cost $310 million to make.
Well, there we
We'll
go.
get to that.
Well, that's a shame that I had this long education. And I should have.
You could have just gone on.
I could have just rung you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, you have this really enriched structure where you're looking at these big questions into civilization, like what makes a person a
But
person.
from civilizations down into the actual fabric of the brain seems like...
Okay, no, bear with me. I'm allowed. I'm still unpacking. I've only unlocked the
I'm
suitcase.
eating my popcorn here.
Yeah. Okay. Or tending the goldfish. Yeah. So
the goldfish
I think
don't
they need
eat popcorn because it doesn't have enough.
At least there's one thing they don't do. Okay.
Protein content.
So anyway, so I wanted therefore to do philosophy at university, and when I went up to Oxford, the way it was taught then was two things, neither of which really excited me. One was formal logic. So that's where you use letters and symbols to develop an argument. And having done maths, using symbols wasn't really that challenging. And the other aspect of it, as it was taught in those days, was very linguistic. So it was all about what do we mean by the definite article. And I remember sitting in the library reading a whole chapter on the.
The what?
The definite article. That is the. The is a definite article.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
So, yeah.
So wait, you're basically saying that the classics and philosophy wasn't complicated enough for you?
No, philosophy, the things that were a priority in my first year as a student, I didn't find as rewarding as when I'd done it at school when we explored human nature and the mind.
Do we really need to be talking about the for this
Exactly,
long?
that was my thought.
Let's move along.
Exactly.
Can we at least do nouns? Jeez.
Well, but yeah, exactly. So I was doing psychology with it, and even though I had no formal science background, this was a new subject, and they were, quite generous in who they admitted, so I was allowed in, even though I don't. And I got more interested in that, and gradually I drifted over away from more behavioural papers to the more physiological. And then my tutor, when I didn't know what I wanted to do afterwards, said, I think it'd be a laugh if you're a scientist, she said. This is the spirit that I love of Oxford. Which I hope is still there, of, let's just give it a laugh, let's do things because it's fun. And she said, I think it'd be a laugh if you're a scientist. So I went to see the professor in pharmacology, and he said it would be the equivalent in science terms of, have you heard of Shakespeare? He said, do you know what a millimolar is? And I didn't know it. And I said,
you had to do basic chemistry, basic physics.
I didn't have to do
biology.
it. No, he asked me a basic chemistry question, which of course I couldn't answer. I said, no, I don't know. And he said, well, tell us about Homer in the coffee breaks, he said. So I learned it on the hoof, and I learned what I needed. So I then did.
Because that is a really complex language. Chemistry is one of the most.
But once you've done classics, it gives you a confidence. Some might almost say an arrogance that there's nothing that's so impossible you can't learn it.
I should have done classics because chemistry. 4 years of chemistry killed me.
No, but Ian. The issue is that people get put off by the image, like especially nowadays, the image of classics or the image of science or the image of engineering, without actually open-mindedly just exploring what the concepts are. And usually the concepts are not that impossible, Well, nothing is impossible as long as you go through it slowly. And if you don't understand, you ask people and you stick at it until you do understand. That's what studying is. That's what learning is. It doesn't come quick. It doesn't come easy necessarily, but golly, it's so rewarding once you master it.
You persevered. You did chemistry on the hoof at Oxford. Sorry, my mind's kind of blowing. I think back on my chemistry days, and they were not pleasant. And then you got into neuroscience.
Well, I drifted into
neuroscience as you do.
What?
Then Alzheimer's. You're one of the world's preeminent experts on Alzheimer's. How did you have?
Okay, so I'll tell you how that happened. So I did a PhD in neurochemistry, and my supervisor was working on an interesting phenomena that he knew, was rather puzzling, that a very traditional enzyme was released from the brain into what's called cerebral spinal fluid. That has, it's rather disparagingly called the urine of the brain. It's a colourless fluid. If you're having a lumbar puncture is sampled, which will reflect and receive lots of chemicals that are being released in the brain. And
that's the stuff you really don't want leaking out your ears after an accident.
No, but nonetheless, it's a very good measure for seeing what may have been going on in the brain, because it won't necessarily get into the blood, because there's something called the blood-brain
barrier. Okay.
So he had found that this funny chemical that should have been staying in the brain was released. He asked me to study and explore for my PhD where it came from in the brain. And to cut a long story short, 3 years later, the answer was it came from an area that is lost in Parkinson's disease. So it wasn't that I woke up one day with messianic zeal to cure these neurodegenerative diseases. It's more I was interested in novel mechanisms in the brain, new things that we
What was the
discovering.
chemical? Can we give her a name?
Well, we can, but it's jaw-breaking. You've said it already.
Oh, I did. It was...
That's the one.
Oh, I want to do it again because it was fun.
Do it again.
Acetylcholinesterase.
Acetylcholinesterase. Yeah.
Well, you pronounce it. Tomato.
Yeah. That's the one. So...
and this was lost...
So that was originating in normal brains from the cells that are lost in Parkinson's disease, a disorder of movement. I'm sure everyone's heard of this. So the idea ran, what makes the cells that are lost in Parkinson's or indeed Alzheimer's special? Because we know that you can have a stroke, you can have damage to the brain, and you don't automatically get neurodegenerative diseases. Yeah. So the cells that are lost in Parkinson's and indeed Alzheimer's must in some way have some other feature above and beyond the generic fact that they're brain cells. Okay. And one clue might be that they're releasing this chemical.
Okay.
So that's how I got into it. It wasn't...
So you followed the chemical... You followed from the classics. You drifted into neuroscience, picking up organic chemistry and chemistry on the hoof. You found this really interesting, unpronounceable chemical that somehow goes through the blood-brain barrier. And
doesn't go through the blood-brain. No, it's into the CSF. Yeah.
As you can see, I'm really
No, we're doing well. We're doing well.
And then this leads you into the causes.
Well, it gives a clue, and the whole trick in science is it's nature telling you something. You know, people often say, the experiment's not worked as I wanted it to. But actually, if it hasn't worked as you wanted to, that's a huge finding. It's
so
nature
a lot of this
something.
time is spent in the lab.
100% of my time is spent in the lab.
How much time in a day are you spent, or in a week are you spending in the lab?
When I was doing my PhD,
when you were doing your PhD?
Oh.
Just because I think people don't really have an idea of what it takes to do serious
I must
chemistry.
say that anyone listening who wants to do a PhD, as I just spoke to a friend of mine's daughter just now, and I said, that's fine, but you have to realise three things. You're going to work long hours, you have no job security whatsoever, and you're on terrible pay. And the only reason to do this is because you can't do anything else because you're so in love with what you're doing.
But when you say you're in love with what you're doing, if like you see people in a cube and they're just staring at their screens, if I were to back up and take a different perspective, you would be there with test tubes and running titrations and bubbling fluids, and it's just like that's what you're just hoping that, oh God, please let it turn blue.
No, it's not so much. The whole excitement is the results, because you then look at the data and you try and interpret it. And sometimes it's not what you expected. You think it's either going to be yes or no, and it's neither, it's something else. And that is the most exciting thing, when suddenly you piece things together and you see it. So,
and you're in new ground. No one's been here before.
And you're the first person to see it.
You're on the moon,
there is
only in the lab.
Nothing like it. So a typical day would be you'd start talking to your biorhythms. Me typically, my own day starts very early and always has done. Whereas when I worked in New York at NYU Medical Center, I was working with someone who would come in at 11 but would work till 2 or 3 in the morning.
Oof.
And that wasn't my
Brutal.
biorhythms.
Inside.
Yeah. But you have to realise it's not like an ordinary job, because whilst you might have doctors or dentists or lawyers doing a job, this is more like writing or painting. It's creative. It's only you will do it in that way. So you get data. Say you and I were both scientists, we had the same data. I would interpret it differently from you. This would lead you to do a different type of experiment for me. So already we've personalised what we're doing, which is why scientists get so snidey and snipey with each other, because it's highly personal. So if someone attacks you or criticises it's your baby. Yeah. It's not like attacking you just because you're the duty doctor.
It's what you put. It's what you put out there. It's your novel. It's your film. It's your art. This is the merging of art and science. Whereas you put everything you had into discovering this chemical and where it goes into the brain. Yeah.
So whereas if we were both taking out someone's appendix, let's hope we'd do it in the same way.
Yes.
It wouldn't make any difference.
We must standardize some.
Exactly.
There must be some form of.
So that's why science, and people don't really grasp this, is much more like art, and it's much more creative.
For sure.
And that's why people do it. I can tell you now, it's not because of any money that's available. You don't do it for the money. You do it because you can't do anything. You know, Luther said when he nailed the thing, the diet of empty, ich kann nicht alles. I can't do anything else. And it's because you can't do anything else.
He's nodding his head.
Ich kann nicht alles, yeah. And there's some things in life you just have to. And so if you're in that, and if anyone's listening, especially a young person, if you feel like that, you should be doing science. And if you don't feel like that, don't do it for status or money, because you'll be disappointed. Well, go into the city or do something like that.
It's the same with art.
Yeah, exactly the same.
If you really want to go through it, you want to be a concert pianist, then your life is kind of miserable. You're sitting there, you better love to play the piano.
Exactly.
No.
But if you do, then all these other things are rather hollow and boring compared to that.
Okay, but as one of the world's preeminent experts on Alzheimer's, my mom always said that you would get dementia from using a nonstick pan. And using like a metal spatula on a nonstick pan. And so I've always had that, like she said, it had something to do with aluminum. True or false?
There is an association, but no, there has been. But okay, I think the issue is not so much what triggers neurodegeneration, because many things can. Some people think it's aluminium, as I would pronounce it. Some people think it's these things called free radicals, which are like molecular Rambos, which normally are...
Molecular Rambos.
Yeah, you can think of that.
We can pause on that.
Yeah,
there we are.
It's a nice idea. They're called free radicals. The ladies listening will know that these are things that are in face creams and so on, attacking...
Yeah, free radicals, sure.
And the defense mechanisms decline in older age, which means that some people will be less efficient at combating them than when they're younger, so that's another idea. Or you could have a stroke without realizing it's, small amount of brain damage,
So you're looking at causes and cures.
No, I'm not looking at, because there's so many different causes that's not something that you can intercept or intervene. Whereas what you can do is ask, why is it when certain areas of the brain are damaged, as opposed to when we have strokes and so on? Why is it when these areas are damaged, they embark on this remorseless cycle of self-destruction, which can actually go on for 10 or 20 years before the symptoms come on. So, there's this long cycle, repetition of more and more cells dying, and that's not usual. And so what we need to know, and what we're working on, and what I don't think has been given enough attention as yet, is what is that basic mechanism? Some people, most people, the dogma is to look at postmortem brains, see things that are in postmortem brains that are not in healthy brains, and think, aha, that's the cause, let's try and combat that. For example, you may have heard of something called amyloid, which is, that's the target, or has been, for the last 10 years, and there hasn't been a new drug for Alzheimer's for 10 years. And if that was the case, then with all the muscle of the pharmaceutical industry, they would have done something right.
Have you run up against funding issues specifically because this is essentially a mental disease, a mental disorder?
No, the funding issues are twofold. One is, in general, Alzheimer's notoriously does not attract the same level of funding as, say, cancer and heart disease. And I think that's because
those are straight-up killers.
Yeah, but there's a stigma still to mental illness. It's people think that if they can not talk about it, then they won't get it. But
how can it be when you're not just dealing with a patient, you're dealing with their families?
Well, as I've said many times, I'll say to you, let's say 10 people love you in the world, if you're lucky.
That's pretty low.
Let's say 10. Yeah. In the UK alone, by the middle of the century, 2 million people will be suffering from Alzheimer's. Effectively, it means 20 million
people
because of the psychiatric,
affected,
of the poor care. And they often go through the stages of bereavement, because although the person's still breathing, there's a sense of loss because the person is no longer talking
it's terrible.
So whereas with cancer and heart disease, which are of course terrible diseases, you're still the person
but you're still that person suffering from the disease.
You're still that person, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So that is why I think people shy away from it.
It's so demoralizing also. It's like I have a very close friend whose father is degenerating, becoming a child, and she's got to change his nappies. Okay. And it's just, she doesn't want to talk about it, and you totally understand, and that's your dad.
Well, there's another story, which I think captures it, of a young person because you can get it younger, the wife came home and her husband was arguing with the 4-year-old over who's going to have the chocolate biscuit.
Ooh. Wow, talk about your second childhood coming around as you age.
But can I just say?
Yes, please.
It is a disease. It's not a natural consequence of aging. It's a disease of older people. But it's not a consequence of aging.
I very carefully plotted murder for several months. I decided that I was gonna kill him. And had it very well, I thought, laid out. But there's always that X factor that you never take into account. I don't think that there's a jury in this country that would have convicted me of murder.
This is Litopia. After Dark. The net's first and foremost literary salon.
Okay, so level with me here. Baroness to hipster. Mm-hmm. What one thing can I do? Actually, just be Susan here for a moment. What should we be doing to guard against to guard against coming down with a degenerative brain disease?
Okay, the first thing is there's no guarantee. What I would suggest you do.
There we are. Suggestions. I'm not. This is not going to be a Sun headline tomorrow.
What I would suggest you
Eating
do
carrots makes
live your life. Get out there, have arguments, interact with people. Engage in all the things that would constitute a full and fulfilled
Are you giving me a cliche card of live every day like it was your last?
No, I haven't.
I'd like to know, do I take vitamin C? Am I supposed to learn another language when I'm 60?
Okay, so let's take those two things. Some people think by taking vitamin C, which are so-called antioxidants, which will combat free radicals, that can help. Sure, that's good as combating free radicals.
Susan Greenfield, famous neuroscientist, shills for the supplement industry.
No.
Okay, we're running.
No, but there's no... Wouldn't it be nice if there was an incident? But because, I say, it's the basic mechanism that we're trying to combat. Now, you can try and do things, to live a healthy life in general. You can take exercise, for example. Now, that's been shown that physical exercise is really important because you're increasing oxygen, and that helps something called neurogenesis. That's to say, the growth of new brain cells. You got to move the blood around. Yeah, but that helps produce new brain cells. So in the old days, when I was first learning about the brain, the dogma was you were born with all the cells you'd ever have. We now know that's not the case, that even in an adult, there's something called neurogenesis, which is the production of new brain cells, and that's related to physical exercise. People who are depressed have a decline in that, for example. Yeah. So that's not to say you won't get Alzheimer's, but things that help you do that. But my own view is rather than fretting that you're going to get this or that, why don't you just, it's not live every day as if it was your last, but make the most of who you are, make the most of what you do, because it might be your last day, you just want to veg out in front of the telly, but why don't you, actually engage with people and develop who you are and come to terms with who you are?
Well, happiness. Find your happiness.
Well, you could call it that, but I think happiness is a multifaceted thing.
Yes, for
Are we talking about contentment? Are we talking about well-being? Are we talking about abandonment and ecstasy? What are we talking about? There's a whole spectrum. I'm
talking about this is good right here. I'm surrounded by good people. I've got
that's well-being. That's well-being.
Well-being, but I feel awesome.
Okay.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. No, but some people look for abandonment and ecstasy. Some people look for wild sensations.
That's true. There's sadomasochism. Okay, so I was looking for you, changing topics here. I was looking for you on Facebook, and I looked up Susan Greenfield. It really didn't look like your picture. And the last post, as of today, was, "Hiya, what was the make and model of your phone you showed me when my daughter was having her lashes done? No question mark. How are you getting on with it? I'm debating getting the iPhone 6 Plus XX." You?
Well, Susan is quite a common name. Greenfield's quite a common name.
That's not you?
No, of course not.
That's not your handle?
I don't know what handle is. No.
Oh, you're not Susan. Okay, so everyone, the Susan Greenfield who works for the NHS on Facebook is actually not
another lady.
It's another
who's obviously worried about phones. Yeah.
There we are. Yes, and we can't weigh in on the 6 Plus. So, have you been on Facebook? Have you?
Never.
No. What do you mean never? Never.
Well, I mean, never.
Have you looked over someone's shoulder when they're like...
Oh, yeah. Yes. I feel no interest, no appeal. I can see no value in spending my time going onto Facebook.
But it's not a question of spending your time. You talk about social networking and such in your book quite a bit, and the effects, some of which intuitively seem like, wow, that's not a good idea to be spending all that time, when you could be productive, when you could be outside, this kind of thing. But surely, we're not talking about trying heroin here. Like, you must understand...
No, but, okay, let's say I did go onto Facebook, yeah?
Oh, yeah? Okay. And you can use my account.
Yeah, and I really got excited. Let's say I suddenly saw what everyone sees in it. Let's say I really enjoyed it, yeah? That wouldn't invalidate or change any of the papers that I cite. You see, the mistake people make is to be self-referential. That's an N of 1, we would say. It's a sample of one person. Yeah?
Right.
So whether I like it or not,
okay.
Whether I like it or not is truly irrelevant.
But
whether I enjoy it or not is truly irrelevant. It's what the
But certainly it would help you to understand it in an experiential way.
No, what I'm interested in doing is looking at what the findings are. I don't want to necessarily have an experience because that's neither here nor there. I choose what experience I want to have. But what's really important is what the findings are.
The princess. When you read a Grimm's fairy tale, you really relate to the princess because you follow her along in the story and you meet the author halfway by imagining what she looks like and the peril she's in. Whereas if you play a video game to save the princess, you don't really have that invested. You just want to kill the monster to get to the next level and this kind of thing.
No, it's not quite. Let me just elaborate that.
Please.
Yeah, because it's not really the princess in a fairy tale. Let's think of the Princess Maria in Tolstoy, for example. Yeah.
Okay,
So-
all right. Why do you have to raise my brow? Why? It's
Because that's the whole point of reading. The whole point of books, as opposed to simplistic
hey, people out there
narratives.
listening, Litopia After Dark, everybody raise their brow an inch. Come on. We'll wait. Okay, yes, let's do Tolstoy.
So we're not talking fairy tales. We're talking about complex and interesting storylines that explore human relationships, human conditions. Yeah, and the more complex and the more interactive and the more infrastructure each character has, I would argue, the more meaning they have and more significance they have. And that's not necessarily the case with a visual icon in a video game. They're not invested with that.
I realize I just took a classical scholar and dropped Grimm's fairy tales on them. And
there's nothing wrong with fairy tales. It's just that.
But let's bring it down to the kids. We were talking about children. They're reading fairy tales for sure, and then they're playing a video game with
and that does concern me. That in a way it's infantilizing people. That even older children are living in a world that probably a generation ago would have been for younger children fairy tales, and instead of reading Jane Austen or Charles Dickens or something that would be
things
regarded
that require higher brain function.
Well, it requires more attention span and a little bit more thought and a
Baroness Greenfield says video games infantilize children. Write that down, Pete.
Well, can you imagine a video game of King Lear, say, or Pride and Prejudice?
Oh yeah, King Lear, totally, where he's like running around trying to get a horse. Slaying people, yeah.
That's King Richard, actually.
Oh, was it? Damn. See, this is where we. Oh no, Lear. Right. Okay. No.
You see, that's the.
But King Richard, yes, that would be sweet.
Yeah. Well, it would be reducing it to a simple storyline, but the whole point of literature is that you're looking beyond what people actually do to what they think and feel.
Okay. I'm with you here, and I love the princess idea because I
Which
played.
one?
Well,
the analogy.
No, I love the analogy because it rings intuitively true, and this is on my experience when I've read a story where I care about the heroine or whoever the love interest is. It evokes emotions.
Yeah.
There's an emotional connection there, and when I play a video game, which I'm not really all that much. I have played, but I don't because I feel like I'm going to lose my whole day into that. But I don't have that feeling. I feel like I just want to slay the dragon and get to the next level, and then I want to go down into the submarine, and slay the demons and all. She is not really. She's the prize.
Yeah, exactly.
It objectifies her.
And I can tell you why. The reason is that she has no history. When you read a book, the character, the fictional character, has relationships and they have a life story. They've done things already.
Sometimes there's a 15-second thing at the beginning of the thing that shows how she was stolen by the winged
Indeed,
by the winged dwarves.
On the whole, she has very little character. She has very little significance. Whereas a good book, and I stress a good book,
she has a very little outfit as well.
Yeah, well, there we are. Well, that's a different motivation altogether. Yeah. But on the whole,
conquest.
Yeah, well, indeed, that says more about you than about anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's change the subject back to Facebook. Yeah. You've also said that when someone asked you about Facebook, and I realize this, some of these questions you must just be so tired of just getting the same deal.
Well, let's say. Off we go.
Okay. Yeah. The Facebook analogy. You've said, well, I don't need to go bungee jumping to have an opinion on it, to make comment. And I would say that if I wanted an opinion about bungee jumping, I would like to talk to someone who's been bungee jumping. Mm-hmm. That would be so. It's like I would feel, for instance, and I understand this is just an experiential thing of one. I really was resistant to Facebook for so long, and I just would see my friends and posting pictures of their cats and the waste of time, and then there's like these where they generate these ridiculous little quotes of, it's better to live a day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep. I'm like, well, what was the sheep's life like? Why are you putting this in my face? But when I was finally talked into it, I have a lot of friends in the United States that to send 30, 40 emails is kind of a hassle. And so maybe it's just a dopamine trigger, but I like to see my friends being happy.
Okay,
I like to share my life.
Let's just think about that, because you've suggested there's various things you've raised there. Yeah?
Good.
The first is there's a difference between a curiosity for a personal experience and wanting to know facts, scientific facts. That's a difference. Now, that's fine if you want a particular experience on something, but that shouldn't be conflated or confused with a finding based on a large sample size and data that's been objectively garnered and so on. They're different things, They're both valid, but they're different. I'm interested in the objective findings resulting from carefully controlled studies on what this shows. Right? That's the first thing. Second, when we talk about friends, as I said in the book, and you've read this, I'm sure, there is a difference between people that you've met in the real world, people that perhaps you've had beers with, talked to into the night, who then go and live in the States, or you live in England and you keep up with them in that way. That's a big difference from having 500 so-called friends you've never met.
At the same time,
and that's been shown to show a difference.
I would agree with that, but at the same time, sort of a corollary effect that I wasn't expecting is that for however it happens, my trainer knows some people who know some people. I now have kind of a finger in the Sikh community. And it's really interesting because I'm getting feeds from them. But it's like I never would have met them in the...
Sure. No, look, I'm not saying that Facebook should be shut down. I'm not saying that. For example, my mum, who's 87, who has, she's quite agile, but nonetheless, you might imagine she doesn't have huge, mobility and so on. One could argue, yes, it would be great if she went on Facebook. They should have fingers in the Sikh community. Should do all those things. Yeah, of course, that'd be great. So, and we know from the sadly now tarnished Arab Spring how this was very valuable. So, of course, it would be silly to think that I was saying that in this Manichaean way it's either good or bad. Of course not. It depends how it's used, like lots of things. But I'm just pointing out that some of the issues that people need to think about.
You do make some value judgment that I think a lot of people are afraid to make. Like 11 hours in front of the screen is bad.
I don't think that is bad. I would say it's worrying, or it raises questions.
If you said bad, then the headline would just
of course,
go crazy.
Like, yeah.
No, you are very measured with your words.
Of course.
But at the same time, there is definite... these are areas for concern, and I feel like there's a cottage industry almost that's sprung up to take you down. For instance, like you are an expert in Alzheimer's, and yet you've made comments on, and yet you're making comments on social media.
Okay, well, let me address that comment. Yeah. Okay, let me finish.
Yeah,
let me finish before we go.
Please.
Yeah. So, as well as being an expert on Alzheimer's, I have 25 years experience of teaching all aspects of the brain to medical students at Oxford. So just because in the lab I work on a particular thing doesn't mean to say I don't have an informed view, and I would hope an in-depth insight into many things concerning... No, let me finish.
No,
this will include, incidentally, dopamine, the very chemical that's released in Facebook.
When I get a like on Facebook.
In which, as it happens...
Yeah. When they push that button,
let me finish. Are you going to just be witty, or you let me finish what I'm saying? No, this is a serious point.
Yeah, so
I'm
with you.
If you keep the back chat low just for a moment.
Yes.
Because it's an important point.
No,
and if you want me to say it, let me say it.
Absolutely, yes, please.
So, because I'm used to this, and it's nice to clarify it. So, let's take dopamine, which is released in Facebook and so on. I've actually published on that, on dopamine, and its conditions of release and the mechanism and so on. So, first of all, you don't need to have done the experiments yourself to have an insight and an expert view on it. Yeah, the types of things that I cite range from molecular biology through to sociology. And no one would be able to do all those things, even if they could afford it, which they wouldn't in terms of lab resources. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Secondly, if you've had a lot of experience of reading and writing and teaching about the brain, as I have for all my life, I would suggest I do have a right, if you like, for want of it, to comment on these things. Yeah, and I have worked on those things anyway. So these arguments, I think, reflect people's defensiveness rather than being open-minded and taking the argument. Doing personal things as though that's going to, because I didn't do the experiment, and that invalidates it. I think it's a rather strange thing.
Do you feel it's a case of, look where I'm pointing, don't look at my finger?
Yeah.
Where you're saying...
Don't shoot the messenger, just look at the data.
Yeah.
Look what I'm saying. What I do, what I am, what experiences I teach are irrelevant. The issue is the message, it's not me. It's the data, it's the facts, it's the ideas that people should focus on.
Do you feel hamstrung as a baroness in the sense that, like, you speak from a bully pulpit, as we would say in the States, and so you're like, this is my field of expertise, but I've been studying the brain for a long time, and you can't pronounce a lot of the things that I've done, and I'm looking over and I'm going, wow. And also some of it is anecdotal, that your friends and teachers and parents have come in and go, I'm really concerned about this. But if you point your finger, then suddenly people are, it seems like a cult of personality.
So I'm not, what's the point you're making?
The point I'm making, it's like, I'm trying to wrap my head around why you're having so much trouble.
Well, I'm not.
When I look on the media...
I'm not having trouble. And let me just say, on my website, which if anyone wishes to communicate with me, is the easiest one. I have a website. On the whole, I get very positive and supportive comments from people. Yeah, if people want to spend their time on this planet ranting and raving in the blogosphere, good for them, but I don't have to watch. So if you are saying I'm in trouble because you're citing that constituency, then I'm afraid I'm not familiar with it. I'm sure this might give an avalanche of people now perhaps writing to my website. Bring it on, let them write to me.
I keep on thinking to myself, would they be writing like this about you if you were not female?
Well, you have to ask them. I mean, to be honest...
What do you think?
Well, given I've never been a man, I wouldn't know because I haven't got a control group.
It's very logical.
Yeah, so, to be honest, let me just get this straight. Rather than fret, and this is a disease of our times, and perhaps, in this self-conscious, selfie, narcissistic, low self-esteem Facebook world, perhaps in this world, people are overly sensitive about who they are, what other people think of them, what they think of other people. Why can't we focus on the ideas? Why can't we focus on the issues? I'm not going to beat up or try and defend. If people want to write that, let them. Yeah. But let them come at me with a robust scientific argument, and I'll wave the white flag and decline that.
We've had a couple of questions from within the colony in Litopia. Yeah. Let me just ask you them. The first one is from a science writer actually called Brian Clegg, and he says in 2011, Bad Science author Ben Goldacre raised a serious point at The Guardian in response to Baroness Greenfield's reportedly announcing that computer games could cause dementia. And on another occasion, linking the use of the internet to the rise in autism, Goldacre asked why, in over 5 years of appearing in the media raising these grave worries, has Professor Greenfield of Oxford University never simply published the claims in an academic paper.
Okay, so let's take the autism one. If you read the book, as Ian has...
I'm working my way through it.
Okay, well, on autism, I cite peer-reviewed papers. Admittedly, I didn't do them, but that doesn't invalidate it.
No.
So that's the first one on that. And I should stress it's autistic spectrum disorder rather than autism in its purest form, which is characterised, therefore, by problems with empathy and interpersonal relations. And there is robust evidence, never definitive, obviously, never conclusive, always controversial, but it's there. The fact I didn't do it doesn't make it wrong. The fact I talk about it doesn't... Why can't I talk about it?
Yeah, well, so it seems. This is the cult of personality that I was sort of cack-handedly trying to go ahead with. Is it Edward Snowden? It's Edward Snowden, right? Yes. Yeah. Edward Snowden points the finger at the NSA and says, "Look, they're spying on everything," and that becomes not the issue. The issue becomes, where's Edward Snowden? He's got a hot girlfriend. He's going here. He's in the embassy.
You see, why I think this is
not talking about.
It's the rise and rise of the selfie mentality, because I would argue, and this is going to be controversial, I'll say it, that it's infantilizing people. And you know how small children are self-referential? Because that's all they can do.
Yeah.
Oh, look at me, I'm doing this, Mummy. Look at me, I'm doing that. And my favourite colour is red, and I don't like sausages. Me. Right? Because they have nothing else.
They're also building up a personality.
Yeah, but that's all they have, little things. They have everything is referred to them.
You've just described reality television.
Yeah, so it reminds me very much that people are stuck in that mode of everything to themselves, and they're in a bit of a fix, because on the one hand, they want everyone to like them. You want all the thumbs up and lots and lots of... On the other hand, another problem is you want to be special and famous. Now, these two things are irreconcilable goals. On the one hand, if you're going to conform and be the same as everyone else, and heaven forfend, someone might not like you, heaven forfend, someone's going to write about you, how terrible is that? What's going to happen to you? If someone doesn't, not everyone loves you, so you better be boring and conformist and the same as everyone else. At the same time, you want to be noticed, you want your friends, you want your followers. Now, this is the problem. Now, I would like to duck out of that, please. If people want to criticise me, that's their problem, that's their issue. If they've got scientific points, let me hear from them. Otherwise, I'll get on with my life. They can get on with theirs.
Fair enough. There's another question here. Let me just...
oh, God, Pete, really? You're going to go with the consciousness question?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. If anyone wants to join the colony at litopia.com, we've got a collection of writers and publishers and people...
very interesting people.
And some very interesting people. And if you send us a comment, we might even pose it to a baroness, like what's about to happen right now. Do it.
Yeah, so here's one from Litopian. Will consciousness spontaneously arise in any neural tissue which is sufficiently complex, i.e. composed of sufficient numbers of tandem and parallel connections? In other words, is consciousness a meta-property of electrically excitable tissue which is unavoidable over periods of evolutionary time?
Yes and no. I think that consciousness grows as brains grow, so it's more like a dimmer switch, so it's not there or not there. And if you think of it as continuously variable, then you can see that one could argue a rat would be conscious but not as conscious as a cat, and a cat would be conscious, not as conscious, and a fetus would be conscious but not as conscious as a child.
We've got a lot of cable
so
here.
We have a...
If I just added
No, so some people think complexity is all that's required, and the philosopher John Searle quipped once, even if it was old beer cans, as long as it's sufficiently complex. I myself argue against that complexity isn't everything, that more there is something special about, yes, neural tissue, but, and this is the big but, and where I would disagree with that person, it has to be embodied. That is to say, it has to be in the system where you have the immune system and endocrine system, as well as the central nervous system.
Can it happen in a jar?
That's what philosophers talk about. They talk about brains in vats, which are what they call thought experiments. Now, of course, you can't prove definitively one way or the other, but my own view is that consciousness is an emergent property that arises from biological tissue, but it has to be a central nervous system, however primitive, in some way in a body. Yeah.
Okay, that was pretty well nailed there.
Nice answer.
All right,
Thank you. Well, just a plug for those who are interested. The Private Life of the Brain, published in 2000. Well, and I'm just finishing another book on it now that's going to be published next year by Penguin.
Well, now that I feel like we've sort of dealt with the detractors, which is what we got from the colony and from people, and I really don't want to focus on that.
You can if you want. No, let me just say
the issues. I think the issues you raise are more important.
No, yeah, exactly. That's what I'd like to say, and I wish, and I would say this to the detractors who now might start insulting me about my website. That's fine. Please focus on the ideas and the data rather than on me as a person.
Well,
and
you
what
can
I'm
ask
doing.
that, but they're not going to do that.
Why not? Why won't they do that, do you think? Bullies.
Because they're
Thank
bullies.
You. There we go. Well, you had it.
Right, well,
you said it.
All right. Well, if you want to answer the bullies in a constructive way, how about this? They're always saying, "Well, you haven't run the study," and obviously it takes millions to run a study, but that's how they're run, and you need labs, you need people. Yeah. Let's construct this study. Pete's got an unlimited budget.
Absolutely.
He secured us a building in was it Chelsea? Did you get us that nice the 3 floors, lots of electricity, tons of computers, mice, the whole. What's the study? What do we do?
Well, there's no
How many people do we need?
That's the problem. There's no one single study. That's the mistake people make.
What would you like to run?
It's not like a litmus test or a pregnancy test. It depends, and this is where again the detractors are getting confused. There's a big difference between a falsifiable hypothesis, a specific question you ask, and a general concept like climate change. You wouldn't say, what's the one experiment we're going to do on climate change, would you?
No, but that's not what I'm asking you personally.
That's the experiments I do at the moment, which is on the plasticity brain. It's in novel brain mechanisms. That's what I do. I do that already.
You're still in the lab?
Of course.
How much of your time is still in the lab?
Well, when I say in the lab, my team is in the lab. I think they'd be horrified if I put a white coat on, but I'm there, and I'm interpreting the data,
You're the GM.
Yeah, well, the GM, the PI, as we call it.
Okay.
No, of course I'm there.
So I think some of the issues that you're raising in social media, which I think have the most resonance, because we're watching a whole generation grow up who've never.
That's how people.
You call them in the book digital natives.
That's how people define their identity. That's how people, apportion their status and their worth now. So of course it's important to them.
What I find most interesting on today is that Pete pulled up from the New York Times. Steve Jobs on his iPad. The reporter asked him, "Well, do your kids?" What do they think of the new iPad? And he said, they haven't used it. We limit how much technology our kids use at home. Yeah. And then he goes on to say, this is rule number 1. There are no screens in the bedroom, period, ever. Yeah. And you're like, this is Steve Jobs. And he goes on to list, other
Well, there's a lovely quote I have in the book from Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, who says he believes the best way to really learn something is to read a book. And he worries that the level of interrupt is affecting cognition and it's affecting deeper thinking. That's Schmidt.
Hello, this is Gary Bushell, and I'd like to invite you to try my new show here on Litopia, entitled, somewhat functionally, I think, The Gary Bushell Talk Show. As you may infer from the title, it's a show where people talk to me. But that really doesn't begin to do it justice. My guests are household names from entertainment, politics, the arts and sciences. You'll recognise the names, but you've never heard them talk like they do on my show, exposing big ideas, revealing even bigger secrets. Uncensored conversation, no spin, no bull. Straight from the heart, direct to you. Join me, The Gary Bushell Talk Show. It does what it says.
I mean, but what if the brain is being rewired in the young?
I mean, what if it is?
Let's say that it's being rewired for the better if the future becomes more technological, becomes more digital.
Okay, we should ask the great James Martin, who was a futurologist, sadly now dead. He said we shouldn't ask what's going to happen in the future. We should ask how do we shape the future. I don't know if you have kids. Do you have kids?
No, I don't. I have a really lovely dog.
Oh, you have the goldfish as well.
And I have many goldfish.
Yeah, but let's just say you actually looked after something with a personality as opposed to fins and a gaping mouth. Yeah, you might want to know what you want those people to be, what kind of environment you want. Don't people realise it's in their hands to shape the world that they want? Unlike many people in many parts of the world who are hungry, who are in pain, who are in danger of being killed, we are, in our privileged society, in a position for the first time ever where we can ask what do we want mid-21st century society to look like? What kind of talents and priorities are we going to have? What kind of things do people want to be? They're going to live, if you had kids, they'd have a 1 in 3 chance living to be 100. What are they going to do for the second 50 years of their life? They're just going to play Grand Theft Auto? They're just going to go on Facebook for 50 years?
I think there'll be something better than that.
What? You can't just, it's not going to fall out. So you have to, you have to shape it, Ian. You have to decide what you want.
I'm being unnecessarily provocative because when I was younger, my main concern as an outdoorsman was people are spending 4.5 hours a day watching television. Like, they need to come outside. Yeah. How are we going to reconcile?
Well, that's an issue. Okay.
How are we going to reconcile wilderness and technology? Yeah. But what you're talking about is not only us coming out of the natural world, but of us coming out of 3 dimensions.
No.
Has it come to that? What's next?
Yeah. Okay. Well, what's next? Well, okay. There's several things to say there. One is there's a very interesting study that came out just recently, so it's not actually in the book, of taking pre-teens in the States, confiscating all digital devices just for 5 days and sending them off to a camp, summer camp. And even within 5 days, there was a change in their interpersonal skills and so on, even in 5 days.
What, they were clawing at the walls, trying to get out and get Wi-Fi?
Yeah, exactly. No, but the human brain is changing all the time. What I predict in the future, very soon, and this is quite sinister, is that the mobile technologies, as already they are, will be dominant. So already people tend to use their phones, incidentally as phones, but mainly as handheld computers.
For sure.
Soon, these are watches. They're already on sale as watches. Soon you'll have Google Glass. So you'll have devices that free you up, if that's the right term, from sitting down or staring at a screen or an iPad. You'll be actually on the move all the time, constantly interface with digital devices, and one can make various predictions about that. And whether that's good or bad is a separate thing. I'm not going to give value judgments, but I certainly know what world I personally would like to live in. But people have to make decisions rather than just sleepwalking into this. You have to say, how can we harness this to deliver what we want? But that puts you in a fix because you have to know what you want. And a lot of people don't.
Well, this is an amazing processing tool, the iPhone here or whatnot. What about the argument that it's just a very good tool? And why not use it? Obviously, moderation is a big issue.
Okay, so that makes sense. Use it for what exactly?
Well, for instance, like if we're having this conversation, and I don't know if it's Eric Snowden or Edward Snowden. I go, Pete, he Googles it. Yeah. Boom, and we know, and we can continue the conversation without that scratching up the table.
Okay, so let's say that we
realize that. Go ahead.
Let's just say that our so-called education has been that now, using digital devices rather than memorizing anything or learning anything. We're having a conversation. I say, I've just been to Barcelona. You don't know where Barcelona is. You have to look it up.
Right.
You then say, well, I've just come back, or I've just been reading. Oh, no, you haven't been reading. You've been saying about someone I've never heard of. Now, this will slow down conversation seriously, even more so than usual. So you need, and you know how the people you get on with best are people you have common frames of reference, where you both can recognize the same quote, where you've both read the same book, where you can both immediately cite the same things.
The friendship is shared common experience.
So if you have none of that, if that has to be accessed all the time digitally, then that doesn't bode well, does it?
Well, does it? I mean, what if it becomes...
Well, it could become.
What if it becomes a contact lens?
What?
And
go on.
And then it becomes essentially just another part of your cerebral cortex, another processing unit.
Well, that's what I'm predicting. That what's going to happen is people are going to be dependent on on digital devices all the time, and we have to think about what that will mean, what will be good, what will be bad about that. About being constantly wired. Now, of course, one of the sinister things, social things about this, is that the more you are digitally wired up and giving readouts, the more people have on you, the more footprint you're leaving that says a lot about you, that can be tracked, that can be surveyed.
For sure, it's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Now, again, it seems that some people fret less about that than someone like me would fret about it, because for me, privacy is a very important thing, which I think goes hand in hand with identity. You can't have one without the other.
See, I would agree, but it seems to me you make the analogy with Mind Change, your book, with climate change, as in, and it also has the added. It has the added symmetry that with climate change, people would say, hey, look, this is happening 20, 30 years ago, and everyone paid it because they didn't want to change their lifestyle. But are we it seems like we're headed to a world without privacy. We seem to be stumbling into that.
Well, we don't have to be, We can, for example...
But it's like with climate change. When they said, we need to stop CO2 emissions, it hasn't happened.
No. Okay,
well,
I'll give you an example of what has happened, and a very simple one. And as with all the analogies, only holds up to a certain extent. When I was small, perhaps a lot of people listening, the older ones, all ladies aspired to a fur coat, to wearing a mink coat. Now, no one in England, at least, would be seen dead wearing a real fur coat. They would get harangued and shouted at by all manner of people. Yeah. They wouldn't dare do it. Has a law been passed that you can't wear fur coat? No, people don't. They've used their brains. They've used information. They've made decisions. And I think it's insulting people to think that they're incapable of doing that. That if people have open minds and they weigh up issues, they can plan their own lives and they can decide what they want and how they want to do it. The technology is there to serve us. It's a means to an end. It shouldn't be an end in itself.
I agree, but when I see the effects of climate change and the way the planet is being reshaped, and the way there's that, the people in the Western world are saying, well, per capita, you guys, you have way more people in China and India. You have way more people using way more as a nation, and they're saying, yeah, but you're using 30 times more resources per capita, and so that circle can't be squared, and consequently, we're headed to acidification of the oceans. We're headed to the shrinking of the ice caps, and so by being alarmist, by going, hey, look, this is actually happening. We should get a handle on it. And then you watch people go, no, look at Susan Greenfield. She's this, she's that. She hasn't done the studies on autism. How dare she make that? And they're not actually focusing on the issue because they don't want to change.
So you think that therefore people like Eric Schmidt or myself shouldn't say the things that we say, and that
I'm personally fascinated by it. We talk about not having a value judgment and just stating the way things are. We look at Destiny, which we touched on before, which is the new massive multiplayer online role-playing game. Okay, and it's this immersive environment where I go in and I put on whatever clothes I want. I deck my avatar out. I push up the R key and I pick up an axe, and I push the L key and I smile at my friend, and every key. So I'm essentially creating a puppet of myself.
Yeah. Why would you want to do that? Just out of interest?
I wouldn't. Personally, I'm like,
why do you think
drop
people
me out.
Okay, let me ask you, why do you think people do that?
It's incredibly addictive. I think for people, I think there's a huge addiction component. I have some very close friends that were gone.
And what's addictive about it compared to the real world?
What's addictive about it? You tell me.
No, as you say, I haven't tried it. But what I find interesting...
What do you think's addictive about it? It definitely, there's a dopamine component.
Well, we know there is. And just for those who don't know what dopamine is, it's a chemical that's related to addiction, arousal, and reward, among other things. It's a hard-working chemical in the brain that inhibits certain bits. For example, the frontal part of the brain, which that frontal part of the brain is only fully developed anyway in late teenage years, early 20s. It's also underactive in other scenarios. And I think you mentioned this in your introduction. For example, people with high body mass index or people who are heavy gamblers. Yeah. So there's an element that if this is an underfunctioning area of the brain, there's a shift to the sensation of the moment as opposed to consequences. Yes. It's a very childlike scenario
totally
where you're
immediate.
living. Yes. So it's a world where actions have no consequences. What I find rather interesting, I was introduced to YOLO.
Oh, right.
Yes, you only live once.
You only live once.
And I think that captures the zeitgeist. It's a very interesting, it's very telling. People put that afterwards. It's the moment of, you're in the moment. Forget about tomorrow. You only live once. And I think that mentality, which in moderation is something that's always characterized the human condition, is now being overly emphasized.
You ask what's the allure of something like World of Warcraft or these massive multiplayer games. These folks that I mentioned, they were a big part of the sort of the community where not where I grew up, but another town. And they dropped out and they went into the World of Warcraft where he went to work, and she maintained their 2 avatars at home full time. I went over to see it. They had 5 screens set up. It was amazing. Just stepping back at the technological sort of wonder and the graphics and this, and you're thinking, oh my God, they haven't been outside the house in however long.
So would you want to live in a society of people like that?
But here's the thing, what did they get? They are in the top 100 people, players. They run a guild, which is, I guess, hundreds of members, and they distribute treasure and organize war campaigns or whatever they do. But that's a community of 20 million. And this is London, this is greater London, and they're the top 100 people in that community. So when they go to Comic-Con or whatever it's called, they're like, oh, you're so-and-so. Oh, your princess is, Z-Raw and whatever. And then they make that connection.
Well, I find it interesting, just as an aside, I mean, this is a small point.
Well, that's something that they're getting, yeah.
Let me explain, is that, as I suspect, when you talk about guilds and tribes, this is very much like little fairy tales. It's little fairy tales. It's the sort of thing that...
It's not the classics? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am saying that. That's exactly what I'm saying. Oh. Yeah, it's not Kafka, is it? It's not Dickens. It's not Austen. It's not Chekhov.
Although I would say, coming in completely blind, never having played computer games, I think you would find it quite complex, quite difficult.
That's a separate issue. Whether it's let me say, one of the good things of video games is that people have suggested it enhances IQ. Because you're exercising a mental agility. That's a separate issue. Processing information is not the same as knowledge or insight. And just because you might have a brain that rehearses and has an agility for recognizing patterns and responding quickly to inputs, fine, that's great. But there's more in the human toolkit than that.
But are you working with information on the subject, or are you working with knowledge of the subject?
That's the thing. When people are processing things quickly, that's processing information. But my own view is knowledge is only when you join up the dots and you have the time to see how things connect up. So let's not confuse the intellectual abilities of humans, which are diverse and many, and some are good. But what I fear with people that are playing fairy tale games, is that that's something that perhaps one does when one's very young, and they're missing out on some of the hinterland, that has characterized up until now how people think about themselves, the others, society, the world, the human condition.
But part of the human condition is wasting time. We've always had a component of wasting time, whether it's skipping rocks. When I was a kid, we used to set up bottles.
But is it waste when you do that?
Or playing Monopoly or gathering around.
Okay, well, that's a separate thing. Quite often, when you are not doing something immediate, if you're staring at the wall, staring out a window in a train, I would suggest that's when you're joining up the dots. And that's what people don't do now, because they're so busy having things in their ears and getting their thumbs slishing fruit, that ninja fruit game, yeah?
Right.
Which I've said,
which I know you were playing on the way over here.
Someone has to explain to me why that's interesting. Yeah. But anyway, wouldn't it be better just to do nothing? Literally, I agree with you, do nothing. And let your brain join up dots and remember things and think about things and plan things.
See, I think on a human level, most people would agree with that. And I think if you want to talk on a spiritual level, people would say, well, yeah, it would be much better if you
go and sit by a lake and
if you were meditating, if you were just sit, let your mind clear and actually be in nature. And that's something that's always been very, very dear to me. And watching the climate change and kill my precious coral reefs is really hard. Is really hard to watch. But to watch people come out of not only the natural world but out of 3 dimensions, it's just heartbreaking.
Well, you said it, not me.
And
sounds like you should have written my book.
No, absolutely not. That's not. But if you tell kids, like, look, don't play the iPad.
No, telling people not to do things is not helpful. Right? So let me give an example.
How do you integrate the technology
I used to be a very heavy smoker. A
person?
long time ago, I was a heavy smoker. And I got really irritated when people just said, don't smoke. Right? It wasn't until I found a book that had an alternative strategy. And it wasn't all the scare statistics of cancer. It wasn't people telling me not to do it. They said, imagine a world where your teeth are white. Imagine a world where you have more money. Imagine a world where you can smell flowers again. Now, can you see the difference? Instead of saying don't do something, you're giving a positive alternative scenario that is the new you that you can buy into. And what I'm saying is not to say to kids, you mustn't do this, but more, couldn't we, as a society, as teachers, as parents, whoever we are, start to think of ways, according to resources and culture and the age and ability of the kids, couldn't we create alternative things that are more interesting? So, for example, in the book I cite, and I'm sure you read it, from an Australian father. I say it's Australia because he said that he finally got his kids out of the house with much protest to go on a cycle ride by the Yarra River. And he said as they were cycling up and down some steepish dog's leg bend, they started giggling spontaneously. And he said, that is music to the ears of a parent. And I never hear that sound when they're online.
No, because they just type LOL.
There we are. So that is the type of environment. And I think the sort of things you can do are read people's stories. You can have face-to-face discussions. You can go for walks.
But
these things are not expensive things to do.
Yeah? Bad parenting is bad parenting, always has been. Bad teaching is bad teaching, always has.
No, but I'm just talking about a society. If we're talking about an environment in which people can bring out the best in themselves and develop their full potential, I don't think that long periods of time where by definition you can't do things in 3 dimensions, is necessarily the best way to go.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. We're going to wrap this up. You talk about the selfie as being like sort of a narcissistic thing, and I see it spread. And sometimes I will admit, if I want to share what's happening with myself and the dog, and it's easier to share it with all my relatives via Facebook. But you've also written in The Guardian on, on Botox, plastic.
Have I?
Yeah, oh yeah, I got a quote
on
here.
Botox?
Yeah.
What have I said on Botox?
Oh God, where is it here? It's that you said you wouldn't rule out plastic surgery.
Oh, okay, probably not.
That you're happy to hear. Let's see.
So why is that relevant?
No, I'm saying I've had Botox, lip fillers, and as for plastic surgery, I would never say never. Mm-hmm. How is this different from a 3-dimensional selfie? You know, you're clearly concerned about image. There's no value.
There's a separate thing here. Yeah, I'm concerned about how I look, but not about image, because unlike many of the types we've been discussing, it's not an issue of how many people follow me on Twitter or so on, or think for myself. Yeah, and many women will say this: how you look reflects on how you feel inside. It reflects on your well-being, and so you'll find a lot. Well, perhaps everyone's like that, you know.
No, we all put on clothes. Look how long it took me to do my hair.
Yeah. So no, seriously, it's I think a separate issue on whether or not you dye your hair, whether or not you wear makeup, whether or not you have Botox is a personal decision. It's personal to you. It makes you feel good in yourself. It's nothing to do with image or trying to impress other people necessarily. Yeah. So that's nothing to do, therefore, as far as I'm concerned, with why people want to post selfies everywhere.
You do cut quite a nice figure through the papers as well. You do get a lot of publicity.
So what am I supposed to say to that?
No, I'm just saying that we're all concerned with how we look, with how we appear. And for people who are going online, they have that same compulsion. It's just more and more.
No,
and
but what's interesting
faster.
is that I don't go out of my way to put photos of myself in the national press. If people choose to take photos of me and put them in, that's their issue. You know, that's not my decision. However, I have a final statement about the selfie.
Please.
Is nowadays that people who are obsessive about social networking share everything, download everything, every moment of thought, every flood of consciousness is out there, it's online. So there's no firewall between them and cyberspace, them and their followers, their friends, their audience, and so on. Yeah, they're blurring. There's only one thing. There's just one thing that's left that's yours and yours alone. What's that? You tell me.
It's my inner dialogue.
No, that's shared with everyone. What have you got left? There's one thing that's yours.
One thing? My soul.
Yeah, no, well, given that everything is downloaded, it's your face. That's the one thing that is yours still. It's your one bit of identity left. That's the only thing you have left.
And that can be changed.
Well, if you do Botox, possibly. But that's the thing you therefore want to leave as a mark that you've been there, that it's yours, that it's you. That's the only thing that's there.
Hold on to your faces, everybody. That's the take-home lesson from talking to Baroness Susan Greenfield. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ian.
Really enjoyed the...
Shame we didn't go on to goldfish, but never mind.
Next time we will have a whole talk about goldfish. I would ask you please not to disparage them any further, lest they come back.
I was thinking of starting a new movement on Facebook, actually.
I'll look for that.
The Goldfish Hating Society, I thought.
Next time when you do Susan Greenfield on Facebook, use your real picture. Thank you very much for joining us in studio today. I'm Ian Wynn, the techno-pagan octopus messiah, here with super producer, Agent Peter Cox, and we wish you a very fond farewell. And please, come off the Twitter, come off the Facebook, just for like an hour. Go outside, walk your dog, smile at a stranger, be a good person. Thank you very much, and good night.